Hey there, I'm Alan Hain, the Lawn Care Nut. Thanks for coming back for yet another week. Now today we're going to talk about leveling off low spots on a lawn, and I'm going to show you the way that I do it, mainly because I have St. Augustine grass, but you could do this or employ this strategy for any grass type. But the reason that I like this method the best is because it is minimally invasive. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but before we go getting too crazy, if you're going to level out spots in the lawn or level out an area in your lawn, it's best if you can determine why it happened in the first place, and that way your fixes can remain in place, because there's probably something else that's creating the problem that you may want to address before you fix the low spots. In my case, I actually had my sidewalks replaced. I don't know if you guys will remember, but these used to be pink, and so I had these replaced a little over a year ago before the rainy season. And even though we didn't change the layout or anything, and when I say the layout, I mean just where the path goes, still they're different bricks, different sizes, they're different, there's more underlayments been put under here. And so what it did is it actually changed the flow of water on the property slightly. And so what's happened is I've got a low area here, and it actually kind of extends right through here. And so a couple of different ways I'm correcting that is I had some downspouts up there that I've redirected, as well as I need to regrade the beds under here. And when I say regrade, not anything too crazy, but just make sure they're sloped this way, as well as I've adjusted the irrigation in there. This downspout also has been redirected. It was going over that way, and that created a low spot right here. So here you can see that low spot. You don't have to measure it like I'm doing here. I'm doing that just to show you in the video, but it's about a 1 to 1.5 inch difference in that area. You could tell this just by walking on it, but the next thing I do is I get dry sand, and that's really the biggest key, is that the sand needs to be dry. As far as what kind of sand you can get anything that's labeled paver sand or even play sand. Either one of those will do fine. The thing is, you want it to be dry so you can spread it nice and easy like you see me doing here. When it seems like I've filled up the hole pretty well and I can start to see the sand sticking up a little bit through the lawn, then I go ahead and just walk across the area with flip-flops, and you can feel right away how close you are to getting this spot fixed. If you did get the sand a little heavy in a couple places, don't worry, because the next step is to get out some water and water it in. And that's why we use sand. Let me show you an example from the beach. Sand is the best natural leveling agent that I've ever used. You can see here at the beach that the areas of the sand that are dry happen to be a little bit bumpy, but as soon as you get to areas in the sand that have been contacted by water, everything turns nice and flat. And the same thing will happen in your lawn, which is why it's important after you spread the sand, and again, you spread it as evenly as you can, then you get out the water and you water it in so it begins to seek its own level. The key is you don't want to bury the lawn. So once you start to be able to see the sand poking up through the grass, that's when you stop and let the grass seek its new level within that sand over time, and then you can add more a couple of weeks or even a couple of months down the line. Now for me, there's really one big reason why I'm going with this minimally invasive route. It's not only because I only have a few spots to do, but it's also because of the growth habit of my turf. What you have to make this big, thick clump of grass is actually a whole bunch of these. Well, that wasn't a very good one. Oh, sorry, buddy. Here we go. So when you pull up my grass, you can see what it's made up of are all of these runners. Those are called stolons. And you'll see they grow and then they push up the grass blades. So the stolon grows, pushes up grass blades. All of those stolons, there's bunches of them all in there, but they're not actually down in the soil. They're just above the soil. That's what stolons do. And then you can see the stolons send roots down into the soil that holds them in. So if I was to scalp this before I put my leveling agent in there, in this case you can see we're going to use sand, if I scalp this, I would actually pretty much kill my turf or severely stunt it. And I don't want to do that. I want to keep it vigorous. The reason you want to keep your turf vigorous, especially in the South and especially in Florida, is because any opening that you create in the canopy will allow for invaders. In this case, you can see this area here is highly densely invaded by wild Bermuda. The rest of the lawn has a little bit, and most of us here in Florida do, but this section right here has a whole bunch. And that is because this is an area that 2 years ago was killed by grubs. And so what that did is it killed the St. Augustine, and I didn't get to it in time, so the St. Augustine's natural defense was gone. I was able to get in here and resod eventually, but before I was able to do that, the Bermuda was able to get in and gain a little bit of ground, and now it's a good 45 or 50% of this section is wild Bermuda. And that is exactly why I want to keep my lawn vigorous. And we're in the winter right now, but where things are slower just because the days are shorter and because it's cooler. But even if this was summer and things were vigorously growing, I still would not want to stunt my St. Augustine grass even for a short time, because I know that wild Bermuda will take a hold if I do it, will take advantage of that. So that's another reason why I want this minimally invasive strategy of leveling, so my St. Augustine grass can pretty much remain intact. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, Alan, listen, I don't just have a couple of spots like you do. My entire lawn is completely bumpy and really just not usable. Well, if that's the case, then you may have to consider something more invasive, such as getting a bobcat, scraping everything up, completely regrading, and then resodding or seeding. Another way that's not quite so invasive but can still be helpful if you do have to flatten out a very large area is to scalp the entire lawn to the ground and then level like you see Jimmy doing here. I'll link his channel and his videos below. Just remember, these two methods require a lot more thought and a lot more work. This next one is always a fun one for me, because whenever you do anything with sand in your lawn, people will tell you that adding sand to the lawn is going to turn it to concrete, and that is an absolute myth. Here are some brick pavers. Listen. Here's the section of my lawn that's been featured in the video. It was done a few weeks ago, before I took my Christmas lights down. Listen to this. Doesn't sound like concrete to me. All right, now when it comes to frequently asked questions, by far the most frequently asked question is, Alan, should I amend the sand with some sort of like topsoil or potting soil or something to make the sand better? And the answer is yes, if you want to, you can. However, I don't do that. I have found over the years that when I break things down into separate steps for people instead of putting a lot of things in combination, they'll actually execute a lot better or a lot more often, or it takes out some of the analysis paralysis. If you're telling people you got to get sand and you got to mix this in and you got to do this ratio and you got to it just, people, they don't take action. So I try to keep things separately, and it kind of makes sense that way. Leveling the lawn is a physical thing. You know, it's a physical change. It doesn't have anything to do with soil health. And so adding the sand, just keep it by itself. That's how I roll. And I work on that first, getting that physical property fixed. Then the second thing I'll do later as a separate step is amend the soil. There are also things to consider. I mean, just think about the texture of sand versus the texture of something with a lot of organic material in it. Does it really seem logical to you that those two things are going to blend well? The answer is no. The sand will pretty much slough any of this organic material fairly quickly anyway. The other thing with organic type material is, what does it do over time? It breaks down. So if you're using this as a part of this, and that's all going to go and level out an area, well, what happens when this portion breaks down? Well, then that means your level area can settle. So it's another consideration. Another one I've talked about before is you never know what's in topsoil. Sometimes you might be putting weed seeds in. And then another thing is that organic material does have some NPK value. So if you were to put too much of this in one spot, the lawn could actually use the NPK in that, and you could get a dark spot. So those are all reasons why I don't amend the sand first. I put that sand in there, get everything level, and then I amend it later, and then I use something that's already broken down as far as it's going to go. That's the humic and fulvic acid. And then this also has some sea kelp in it, which is going to stimulate some growth. RGS stands for root growth stimulant, and I'm spraying this on my lawn anyway, but what I'll do is the areas where I know I put a lot of sand for leveling, I'll just spray a lot more in there. We call that painting it black, and I'll just do that. And I'll let that humic and fulvic get down in there, and that'll amend the sand just fine over time. So there you go, guys. I hope this video has been helpful to you. I hope it'll help you to level out the areas in your lawn, because ultimately the idea is to be able to enjoy the mow, and we have a nice, flat, smooth lawn. That's always going to be a little bit better. So hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Hit that like button, subscribe below. leave a comment, leave a like. Let's get a conversation going in the comments. I'm Alan Hain, the Lawn Care Nut. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the lawn.